Okay, good morning, and we are in chapter 43 of ALMA. I've had some technical difficulties, and so we're doing this for about the third time. But one of the things is that this is a lot of reading in this chapter, or this week. A lot of reading, but I'm going to try to do all of the reading, because one of the things that when I started this was so that my family could hear me read the scriptures, and I figure I might as well read all of them. It's a bit difficult. I've tried to skip over things before, and it's difficult because you just want to read them all. And one of the things with these chapters, it's a memory of mine when I was a child, or not a child. I was 14, and I'd taken it to study the scriptures on my own, and I'd read the scriptures with my family quite a bit, but this is my first year in seminary, and we're studying the Book of Mormon, we're reading it, and when I got to these chapters, I could not put it down. In one night I read 100 pages, and I'm not a fast reader. It wasn't that, it was the fact that I just couldn't stop reading it because it just was good. I knew a lot of the stories and what was going to happen because I grew up with them, but it was just compelling. Anyway, I'm going to get right into it because there's a lot to get into. So the armies of the Lamanites were in the land Jershon, and now the leader of the Nephites is a man who had been appointed to be chief captain over the Nephites. Now the chief captain took command of all the armies of the Nephites, and his name was Moroni. He's a main character. That's the first time we hear about him, but he's going to be the main character throughout all of these chapters that we read this week and next week. And also, it's a break from other times when they've had wars, because before, remember, Alma went to war. It's usually the chief judge or the kings that would go into battle and lead their people. Now they're appointing someone to do that, and I think Alma put that in. And Moroni took all command and the government of their wars, all the command and the government of their wars, and he was only 25 years old when he was appointed chief captain over the armies of the Nephites. And it came to pass that he met the Lamanites in the borders of the land of the borders of Jershon, and his people were armed with swords and scimitars and all manner of weapons of war. And when the army, notice how they really do talk about the preparation here. When the armies of the Lamanites saw that the people of Nephi, or that Moroni had prepared his people with breastplates and with armed shields, and also with shields to defend their heads, and also they were dressed with thick clothing. Now the army of Zarahemnah was not prepared with any such thing. They had only their swords and their scimitars, their bows and their arrows, their stones and their slings. They still had a lot, it sounds like it. And they were naked, save it were skins which was girded about their loins. Yea, all were naked, save it were the Zoramites and the Amalekites. But they were not armed with breastplates nor shields. Therefore they were exceedingly afraid of the armies of the Nephites because of their armor, notwithstanding the number being so much greater than the Nephites. Behold, now it came to pass that they durst not come up against the Nephites in the lands in the borders of Jershon. Therefore they departed out of the land of Anti-Onan into the wilderness. If you want to find maps, they're in the Seminary and Institute manuals. There's also maps on Scripture Central that I've enjoyed looking at as well, and to look at their journey around about the wilderness away by the head of the river Sidon, that they might come into the land of Manti and take possession of that land, for they did not suppose that the armies of Moroni would know whither they had gone. But it came to pass that as they departed into the wilderness, Moroni sent spies into the wilderness to watch their camp. And Moroni also, knowing the prophecies of Alma, sent certain men unto him, desiring him that he should inquire of the Lord whither the armies of the Nephites should go to defend themselves against the Lamanites. And it came to pass that the word of the Lord came unto Alma, and Alma informed the messengers of Moroni that the armies of the Lamanites were marching around about the wilderness, that they might come over into the land of Manti, that they might commence an attack upon the weaker part of the people. And those messengers went and delivered the message to Moroni. Now Moroni, leaving a part of his army in the land of Jershon, lest by any means a part of the Lamanites should come into the land to take possession of the city, took the remaining part of his army and marched over the land of Manti. If you think of it spiritually, of preparing yourself, you prepare yourself by arming yourself, by protecting yourself, and also you use common sense, send spies out is what he did, but you also turn to the prophets, which he did with Alma. So that's a few things just out of those few verses. And he caused that all the people in the quarter of the land should gather themselves together to battle against the Lamanites, to defend their lands and their country and their rights and their liberties. These parts in pink are the main theme of these chapters. And it's brought up over and over again. It's the same theme. So watch for that. Therefore, they were prepared against the time of the coming of the Lamanites. And it came to pass that Moroni caused that his army should be secreted in the valley which was near the bank of the river Sidon, which was on the west of the river Sidon in the wilderness. And Moroni placed spies round about, that he might know when the camp of the Lamanites should come. And now Moroni knew the intent of the Lamanites, that it was their intention to destroy their brethren, or to subject them and bring them into bondage, that they might establish a kingdom unto themselves over land. That was what the Lamanites were fighting for. What were the Nephites fighting for? Again, here it is. He also, knowing that it is the only desire of the Nephites to preserve their lands, their liberty, and their church, therefore he thought it no sin that he should defend them by stratagem. Therefore he found by his spies which course the Lamanites were to take. Therefore he divided his army, and brought a part over into the valley, and concealed them on the south of the hill Riplah, and the remainder he concealed on the west of the valley, on the west of the river Sidon, and so down into the borders of the land Manti. And thus, having placed his army according to his desire, he was prepared to meet them. And it came to pass that the Lamanites came on the north of the hill, where a part of the army of Moroni was concealed. And the Lamanites had passed the hill Riplah, and came to the valley, and began to cross the river Sidon. The army which was concealed on the south of the hill was led by a man whose name was Lehi, and he led his army forth and encircled the Lamanites about on the east in their rear. And it came to pass the Lamanites, when they saw the Nephites coming upon them in their rear, turned them about and began to contend with the army of Lehi. And the work of death commenced on both sides, but it was more dreadful on the part of the Lamanites, for their nakedness was exposed to the heavy blows of the Nephites, and the swords and their scimitars, which brought death almost at every stroke. While on the other hand, there were now and then man fell among the Nephites by their swords and the loss of blood, for they, being shielded from the more vital parts of the body, or more vital parts of the body being shielded from the strokes of the Lamanites by their breastplates and arm shields and their head plates. Thus the Nephites did carry on the work of death among the Lamanites. Notice they know that those are very helpful to have. And it came to pass that the Lamanites began to be frightened because of the great destruction among them, even until they began to flee towards the river Sidon, and they were pursued. Where are we? And they crossed. Wait. And Lehi. Oh, where are we? And they were pursued by Lehi and his men, and they were driven by Lehi and into the waters of Sidon. And they crossed the rivers of Sidon, and Lehi retained his armies upon the bank of the river Sidon, that they should not cross. And it came to pass that Moroni and his army met the Lamanites in the valley on the other side of the river and Sidon, and began to fall upon them and slay them. And the Lamanites did flee again before them towards the land of Manti, and they were again met by the armies of Moroni. Now in this case the Lamanites did fight exceedingly, yea, never had the Lamanites been known to fight with such exceeding great strength and courage, no, not from the beginning. Now they were inspired by the Zoramites and the Malachites, who were their chief captains and leaders, and by Zerahemnah, who was their chief captain, or their chief leader and commander. And they did fight like dragons, and many of the Nephites were slain by their hands, for they did smite into many of their head plates, and did pierce many of their breastplates, and they did smite off many of their arms, and thus the Lamanites did smite in fierce anger. So these guys are really starting to say, oh, wait a minute. So there was a change in their attitude a little bit, but it's still not the same. Nevertheless, the Nephites were inspired by a better cause, for they were not fighting for monarchy nor power, but they were fighting for their homes and their liberties, their wives and their children, and their all, yea, for their rights of worship in their church. And they were doing that which they felt was the duty which they owed to their God. For the Lord said unto them, and also unto their fathers, that inasmuch as they are not guilty of the first offense, neither the second, ye shall not suffer yourselves to be slain by the hands of your enemies. And again the Lord said that ye shall defend your families even unto bloodshed. Therefore, for this cause were the Nephites contending with the Lamanites to defend themselves and their families and their lands and their country and their rights and their religion. Now it came to pass that when the men of Moroni saw the fierceness and the anger of the Lamanites, they were about to shrink and flee from them. And Moroni, perceiving their intent, sent forth and inspired their hearts with these thoughts, yea, the thoughts of their lands and their liberty, yea, their freedom and their bondage. And it came to pass that they turned upon the Lamanites, and they cried with one voice unto Lord their God for their liberty and their freedom and their from bondage. And they began to stand against the Lamanites with power, and in the selfsame hour they cried unto the Lord for freedom. The Lamanites began to flee before them, and they fled even to the waters of Sidon. Now the Lamanites were more numerous, yea, by more than double the number of the Nephites. Nevertheless, they were driven in so much that they were gathered together in one body in the valley upon the bank of the river Sidon. Therefore the armies of Moroni encircled them about, even on both sides of the river. For behold, on the east were the men of Lehi. Therefore Zarahemnah saw the men of Lehi on the east of the river Sidon, and the armies of Moroni on the west of the river Sidon, and they were encircled about by the Nephites, and they were struck with terror. And Moroni, when he saw their terror, commanded his men that they should stop shedding their blood. That we will stop there, because that's an amazing cliffhanger almost, and we will pick this up in the next part, and I